Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press, and from listeners like you. This week, help support the work of Central Valley Daily and KVPR by becoming a monthly member. Join at $8 a month or more and access ad-free NPR podcasts through NPR Plus. Give now at kvpr.org/donate or by clicking the donate button on the KVPR app.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Thursday, December 12th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. In 1990, a federal law required universities to give back Native American remains and cultural belongings that were taken for research purposes.
The mentality within the academia world, especially in this field, that what they have and what they've uncovered is their personal property, even though it's remains of loved ones, of people's family.
But tribes are still grappling with the law more than 30 years later. We'll learn more in just a few minutes, but first, today's headlines. Former San Joaquin Valley Congressman T.J. Cox has agreed to plead guilty to 2 financial crimes. As KVPR's Carrie Klein reports, it's part of a plea deal.
In exchange for a guilty plea, prosecutors agreed to drop almost all of their charges against Cox. The former Valley congressman was originally indicted on 28 counts, including money laundering and campaign contribution fraud. Now, only 2 counts remain, related to wire fraud. Cox appeared briefly in federal court on Wednesday in downtown Fresno. Attorney Mark Coleman spoke afterward.
You're never happy when a client pleads guilty, but it gives us the opportunity to argue for a sentence we believe it's appropriate.
Coleman acknowledged Cox made mistakes in his many business dealings.
People sometimes make shortcuts, and it's something he had to deal with.
Cox was elected to Congress in 2018 and served 1 term before being defeated by David Valadao. His next hearing is scheduled for January. He faces up to 20 years in prison. For KVPR News, I'm Carrie Klein.
Governor Gavin Newsom has called a special election for Assembly District 32. The district includes parts of Kern and Tulare counties. The seat was left vacant by Vince Fong. The Bakersfield Republican replaced Kevin McCarthy in Congress earlier this year. Fong's name was on the November ballot twice due to a legal loophole. He won both races but chose to serve in Congress only. The special election will take place on April 29th. The city of Clovis is changing up the way it handles local elections. The city council will move to district-based elections beginning next year. The city formerly used an at-large system, meaning all city council candidates ran against each other regardless of where they lived in the city. The move comes after the threat of a lawsuit. Critics of the former system argued that at-large elections make it harder for minorities and other historically underrepresented groups to compete. The city says it will host a series of workshops to draft the new council districts. A giant underground tunnel that would transport water is one step closer to reality. The tunnel, dubbed the Delta Conveyance Project, received $142 million from a major Southern California water agency, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, which serves 19 million people. The tunnel would reroute a large part of the state's water supply and is expected to cost a total of $20 billion. Officials say the project is critical to fixing aging infrastructure and adjusting to changes made by climate change.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Fresno Mazda, part of the Prieto Automotive family, with special holiday financing deals on select models through the end of the year at the new showroom on Blackstone and Barstow. Information at myfresnomazda.com.
And now to our main story. In 1990, a federal law required universities to return Native American remains to their homes after using them for research and display. But a recent state audit shows many universities have been breaking that law ever since. As KVPR's Rachel Livinal reports, tribes face many legislative and emotional barriers in getting their ancestors back.
Along the Merced River, a short distance from Yosemite National Park, there is a freshly covered grave for a native boy. Jasmine Jagir dug it herself among fallen yellowed leaves.
we're bringing them home in a good way, and we're doing it the best way that we know how.
He didn't die recently. Jagir says the native boy was uncovered during an archaeological excavation nearby.
Even though we don't necessarily have a name or a face for this ancestor, you still feel it as though you are burying like your very close first cousin.
Jagir is from the Southern Sierra Miwok tribe. She says this ancestor was returned shortly after he was found, but others have been held for decades in universities and museums. Jagir says this practice of using ancestors for scientific purposes is
just about the same as somebody going to your family cemetery and digging up your grandmother.
To her, they're not remains. They're her people. But her tribe could soon receive more ancestors and cultural belongings. That's because of a handful of laws introduced by California Assemblyman James Ramos.
When other people hold remains of another person and sees them as not even human, but more of a prized possession, we have a problem.
Ramos is a member of the Serrano tribe and the only Native American in the legislature. His laws led to a series of recent audits by the state auditor. Among the findings, the reports found the CSU system still held nearly 700,000 ancestors and belongings, more than 30 years after the federal law was passed.
The mentality within the academia world, especially in this field, that what they have and what they've uncovered is their personal property, even though it's remains of loved ones, of people's family.
Some universities told KVPR they're working to return ancestors and are consulting with tribes. Earlier this year, Ramos held a hearing in Sacramento on the audits. Leo Cisco gave testimony. He's the chairman of the Tachiyokut tribe in Lemoore.
I'm here representing our elders because they can't speak for themselves.
He said he wants young people in his tribe to know the truth.
You know, they're not a bag of bones sitting in boxes. They're our people. And those are the things that we have to explain to our youth.
But when those young people decide to go to college, he's conflicted.
Are we lying to them? Yes, we are. As tribal leaders, I am ashamed to say that I am lying to them because I want them to go to further their education, but the places I want them to go are doing stuff like this to our people.
At the gravesite near Yosemite, Jagir holds a reburial ceremony for the native boy. She's glad he's home now, but every time a new ancestor is returned to her tribe, it opens up old wounds.
This is an emotional venture that we are taking. It's a spiritual burden that we have to carry and then lift.
She hopes she can rebuild a wrong inflicted on generations past.
I'll be cherishing my children when they get home and just really being grateful for how things are now and like that my children are safe and they'll always be safe. I don't have to be scared to be a proud, like, Native woman.
The task ahead doesn't frighten her, but some days she needs rest in order to continue. For KVPR News, I'm Rachel Livinal.
And Rachel joins me now to talk more about her reporting. Hey, Rachel.
Hey, Liz.
So, Rachel, you attended this burial ceremony near Yosemite. How did you meet Jasmine Jagir, and what was it like to witness such an emotional event?
Yeah, so I met Jasmine through some folks at UC Merced. It was really hard to get in touch with someone from a tribe. I think generally they're just very busy and overburdened with work. And the reburial ceremony, it was really exhausting and emotionally charged. Even though this event had nothing to do with me, I felt very moved by the way they were able to put this ancestor to rest. I would say that the ceremony was just really peaceful and full of love for that ancestor. And it definitely changed the way I looked at this story when I was reporting on it.
Yeah, what really struck me was the comment that Jasmine made that using Native American ancestral remains for scientific purposes is like digging up a family cemetery. Can you emphasize further just how important these remains are to Native Americans?
Yeah, so to natives, these are not remains. Jasmine says that because that is literally what it is like To them, Native people have buried their loved ones, and then when institutions come in and dig them up and take them, it is like taking them out of their rest. And for her, it's also like taking them out of their spiritual journey that they're on. To them, those ancestors are not put to rest until they are back home in their rightful place in a new grave.
You report that universities told you they're consulting with tribes about remains, or ancestors rather. What campuses did you speak to, and did they give any more details?
Yeah, so I spoke to 3 Valley CSUs, so Stanislaus State, Fresno State, and CSU Bakersfield. Fresno State and Stanislaus State are in consultation with tribes, which is the second step in the process. So they're like talking to tribes, trying to figure out, like, does this ancestor belong to you, or does this cultural belonging belong to you? And seeing if they can figure out if it does. CSU Bakersfield said they are working on updating their records, so they haven't yet repatriated anything, and they also haven't started that process. Also, Bakersfield has been struggling to hire a full-time coordinator for the law. That was something that every CSU was required to do, and Bakersfield has just been struggling with that. And then Fresno State is trying to hire someone to help with building trust among tribes. They do have a full-time coordinator for the law, but they need someone else to help with the trust building. And I also did another small story on this that will come out as well.
Did you get an idea how many Native American remains and items are at universities here in the Central Valley?
Yeah, so I only have an idea. According to the audit released last year about how CSUs were doing in their progress on following the law, the 3 Valley universities held a total of 37 ancestors and more than 38,000 cultural belongings. That number has changed, but universities have not released exact numbers for both ancestors and cultural belongings to me, so I don't know for sure, but that's like an estimate as of last year.
Okay, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think more than anything, folks should think about this law and the kinds of things that happen to Indigenous people that exist still today. This story is just one aspect, but there are other problems Native people deal with in poverty and in the missing and murdered crisis, which is where 4 out of 5 Native women experience violence in their lifetime, and homicide is one of the top 10 reasons of death for Native men. We may not think about these things, but it shouldn't fall to our purview.
KVPR's Rachel Livinal, thanks so much for this reporting.
Thank you, Liz.
And that does it for today. If you have a story idea or feedback for Central Valley Daily, we would love to hear from you. Just email us at podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR, with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
We could all use a little help navigating the news these days. The Consider This podcast wants to give you a hand. 6 days a week, we'll help you make sense of the day's biggest news story and what it means for you in less than 15 minutes. Listen now to the Consider This podcast from NPR.